Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to another special episode of Teamwork a Better Way. I'm Christian Napier, joined by my illustrious, amazing co-host, Spencer Horn. Spencer, how you doing this Monday morning?
Good morning. Good early Monday morning, Christian. Fabulous to be with you again. We were just together on Friday.
I know. You know what? We had such a great time on Friday. We just had to do it again, and I'm super excited to be with you. You may notice that my backdrop looks a little bit different than normal.
I do notice. Where are you?
I happen to be in the airport on my way to an AI conference in Austin, Texas. And so hopefully the sound and the lighting is okay. I'm in like one of these little
I think you look
telephone kind of
great.
thing.
You look great. I love it. I love your glasses and the black shirt. You look very, Ring of Fire, like you're ready to sing
Going a little Johnny Cash here.
Johnny Cash on us. Yes.
All right. Well, Spencer, let's not delay any further because we've got an amazing guest here with us today who has taken time out of her very busy schedule to be with us. So why don't you go ahead and introduce her?
Yes, so we have Roberta Moore. I'm so excited to bring her up here in just a second. She is the founder of EQI, and she's an executive coach and author of Emotion at Work, which is just perfect for our podcast. Emotion at Work, Unleashing the Secret Power of Emotional Intelligence. And Roberta draws on nearly 4 decades. No, Roberta, you started when you were 12, for heaven's sakes. 4 decades in executive coaching, professional service, and psychotherapy to help her clients understand and unleash the power of emotional intelligence through individual and team coaching. I'm excited because I'm also a team performance coach, and I want to ask her about that, but she does EQ coaching and team workshops and EQ assessments and audits. And Moore's work, I'm not going to call you Moore, I'm going to call her Roberta's work, has earned her several really prestigious awards, Christian. In 2020, she won the Enterprising Women of the Year Award and one of the most prestigious recognitions for women business owners, as well as the 2020 Globee Women World Female Achievers Champion of the Year Award. That's a mouthful. Sorry, I'm messing that up. And in 2021, she won the Stevie's Award. And Roberta is also a member of the Forbes Coaches Council, which is fantastic, and publishes articles on Forbes monthly. And I've read some of those. Really, that's quite an honor. And she is contributing author to the 2020 book, The Anatomy of Accomplishment, Your Guide to Bigger, Better, Bolder Business Results, an anthology of professional wisdom from women business leaders across the country. So all of our listeners, I want to introduce to you Roberta Moore. Welcome, Roberta. Good to have you.
Thank you. Thank you for the warm welcome. It's very exciting to be here.
Yeah, so coming to us from St. Louis, Missouri, I hope that it's the weather's good right now for you.
Oh, yes, it's unusually cool today. Usually we're a lot hotter and we're burning up, but not this morning.
Yeah, we too. It's starting to feel nice. We're getting these cool off rains. I don't know about you, but let's jump into our topic. This is really putting EQ in action in teams is really what we want to talk about today. So how would you define emotional intelligence is a big topic. I mean, how would you define it in the context of team performance, and why is it so critical for the success of a team?
So, emotional intelligence, there's many different definitions. And let me just tell you my favorite definition because I think it will help illustrate the point. I like to tell people, if you play cards, if you could pretend you have a deck of cards and each card in the deck represents one emotion, and you're in a situation, let's say there's a team meeting or something, and let's pretend tension is building because let's say it's a hot topic and people have different opinions and they're being very vociferous and almost bordering on argumentative. If you're somebody who, instead of just blurting something out that you can't take back, that might be damaging or offensive, if you can pull selectively and intentionally a card, meaning an emotion, from that deck, and you play that card, you play it instead of that emotion playing you, you're going to be more effective in that meeting. You're going to be more productive. You'll make a better contribution. That's my favorite definition of emotional intelligence.
Well,
And you can understand. Go ahead.
no, sorry, I really like that because it's about kind of viewing yourself, and if you look at that card deck, you're looking at, okay, so I have options here, and I'm not just going to allow my emotions to dictate. Well, and sometimes we don't even think about it; we just automatically allow our emotions to dictate. So instead, we're viewing this deck of cards as a way to respond. I love that. Well, you gave an example of maybe a sign that a team is struggling. There's arguments going on. What would you say are some signs that a team is struggling emotionally? I know you have an assessment. I have it here. What are you looking for when you see a team struggling? What are the signs?
They can be different for different members of the team. Probably no surprise there, right? But you might notice if you're the team leader, if somebody's kind of sitting in the corner and they're being quiet, and because that happens, some people who are very introverted or not, they don't have their assertiveness or their emotional expression skills built up yet, will tend to sit in the corner and be quiet. That's a bad sign, because you want, if somebody shuts down, you don't know what they're thinking. And they're usually thinking something that they're timid or reluctant to put out there and say, maybe because they're afraid of judgment from the other team members or the boss, the leader. They might be afraid of conflict, when actually healthy conflict in a team is actually vital for top performance. So again, if you can feel the tension, how in a room when people are not talking, you can feel that tension. Encouraging people to speak, making it a safe psychological workspace, means the leader sets the tone. And if the leader can set the tone of, hey, we all respect each other here, we can have a conversation where everybody feels safe, that they won't be shamed, blamed, judged, or criticized. Can you understand that leaves people to be more free to express themselves? And then you can get this really good discussion going to find out, where are the gaps, where are the holes in the team, in their dynamics.
So I'd like to take a step back, Roberta, if I may. When you think of these words, emotional and intelligence, traditionally they don't go together, right? When we think about intelligence, if you just say that word without any other context, it usually appears to be a pretty, I don't want to say cold in a negative way, but it's more analytical. It's studious, maybe a little bit more academic. And when you think about emotion, you think about spontaneity. And again, I'm just taking these words completely out of context. And so, what I'm curious to know is, how did this come together for you? What is the story behind your career that led you to this point? Because you know, we throw the word around now, and like you said, there are many definitions, and we may just kind of take it for granted, or emotional intelligence. But those at least from a layperson's perspective, they come from two different places. And I'm curious to hear from you how you got to where you are now with emotional intelligence.
Thank you, Christian. I love this question. I love being able to answer this question. And I often talk about it in my EQ workshops. So I started out in accounting, in internal audit in a large company, and then I went into public accounting. And when I was younger, I was very sensitive to anything that felt like criticism, because I grew up in a household where there was a lot of criticism and you had to get things right. And I became a little perfectionist. So when I was younger, and I had an evaluation after an audit that I performed, and the person doing the evaluation said, "Why did you take such a big sample size? You took too big of a sample size." And I burst into tears. I mean, no kidding. Poor guy. I was young, older man. And I was like, well, because there was nothing else to do. There was nothing else to audit, and I wanted to be busy and I wanted to work. So I did my big spreadsheet. But I learned then that even though I was book smart and intelligent myself, I was not intelligent about the use of my emotions. And I knew I had to do something about it. So at the time, back in those days, they didn't have coaches, performance coaches, but they did have therapists. And so I saw a therapist to help me learn to use my emotions better at work. And then just along the way, when I was an expert doing tax returns and public accounting, I realized that it was more exciting to me to deal with the client than it was to actually put the tax return together. And I noticed in our culture at the time, people were not gelling. The team wasn't gelling, and what was missing was, it wasn't that people didn't have the expertise on how to do tax returns. It was how people didn't know how to talk to each other. So I decided to go back to school, got an EDS in marriage and family therapy, because that's all about systems theory. Because I was interested in how relationships work and how one person in a family or a team, if they're having an issue or a problem, they can affect the whole team or the whole family. Then the whole family becomes part of that problem. So I studied all that. And then somewhere along the line, noticed people were coming, for therapy at that point. But I noticed if they were having trouble communicating with a spouse and they were professionals and I'd ask them how they were doing at work, they'd be having trouble communicating at work too. And I got the big aha, like, oh my gosh, we're not people who can chop ourselves up into little pieces. We're holistic. And if you combine emotional intelligence, which is a skill building, it's a skill building coaching type model, with if I combined that with what my knowledge was in therapy and psychology, it would be holistic. I'd be able to address the human being as a whole. Because let's face it, Christian, what we do, if you're having a problem at home, if you get into a spat with your spouse before you leave to work, are you going to perform at your best that day if you're preoccupied worrying about, what things will be like when you go home that night, if you work outside your home? So I wanted to address people's personal lives and their business lives, because when those two are solid and integrated, a person is definitely more productive and then more profitable, and they're also more personally fulfilled.
How often do you hear that someone say to you, Roberta, I keep my personal and my professional life separate. I'm one way at home and I'm another way at work. Like there's some kind of bifurcated, individual into two people. How often do you hear that?
Well, you're right on point, Spencer, because you might guess I hear it a lot. It's a very common thing, and where it tends to come out, where it first tends to come out is when I'm usually starting a coaching engagement. I use the EQI 2.0 assessment tool. It's owned by MHS Incorporated, and it was developed by two clinical psychologists. And people will say, when I go to debrief them to share their results, oh, I was thinking about how I am at home. I wasn't thinking about how I am at work. Or they might say, I was thinking about how I am at work and not how I am at home. But the two clinical psychologists who created this model and this assessment tool, my understanding is they factored the questions and the research so that it doesn't matter if you think of how am I at home or how am I at work. It's all coming out the same. You either have the skills or you don't have the skills. You're either balanced in the 16 skills or you're not balanced in the 16 skills.
I'm
And
curious. Do you
most
think
people have
that's some
skills
sort
to
of
improve.
deflecting though, by saying, well,
Yes.
I'm more aware than I really am.
People just don't, they don't know themselves. We have a conscious mind and an unconscious mind. So I'm hoping to give people the benefit of the doubt. They're just unconscious to it, or they haven't reflected on it before. But often, Spencer, as we push forward, as we move forward in the coaching engagement, they will start. I just had somebody on Friday say, oh, I've been thinking about what we talked about. Oh, because I asked this person tends to jump in as a leader and do somebody else's work when somebody's struggling with a problem instead of teaching them how to do it right. They just want to jump in and save the day. And I've been asking that person for the past month, where does that come from? Oh, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. Well, it probably feels good, right? Well, I guess. And then bingo, on Friday, they sent me an email saying, oh, my mother was like that. Oh, my grandmother was like
But
that.
they never stop and think about that. So I've got to
Correct.
ask you. I just heard a quite famous neuroscientist. I don't know, Rene, is it Gomez? He speaks a lot, and he says that only 10% of people, and that's everybody worldwide, are self-aware. What do you think about that number?
I would have thought it was 5%.
Okay, so
That's
I feel
pretty
good.
good.
But we all know somebody. If you think about it, not if you don't point at yourself and just think about who you work at, how easy is it to think of somebody that you know that's not self-aware? Now and then
Yeah, easy.
and
And
then I
and
have to
that's
stop and
so,
say, well, that's me too.
you can be too self-aware. Did you know that? That was me when I was getting my leadership coaching specialization. Doug McKinley, who was facilitating the group, said, Roberta, you've got to dial back your emotional self-awareness, because I was picking on myself and I was over analyzing everything I did. That's not productive either. So that's that skill of being in balance.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting, and balance is sometimes about managing contraries, and we struggle with that as humans. Mercy and justice and action and thought. I mean, what's the right balance? That's really hard. But before we move off, I want to go back to what you talked about, systems theory, for just a moment. And you're talking about how families are a system that impact the individuals in that system. The same is true at work, and so you're a team performance coach. Tell me, how do you address that system? Do you do it by working with individuals in the system, or do you address the system as a whole?
That's a great question, and I'm so glad you asked that, Spencer. Both. The answer is both, and it really just depends on the appetite of the company that hires me and their culture. So, for instance, in one very large insurance company, I did a 3-year program where the managing partner chose the team he wanted me to work with, because there were several different teams, as you might imagine. And so he took like the elite team, and I assessed each person with the EQI 2.0, debriefed them confidentially and individually, and then the coaching to build the skills was done in a group. So that was done in a group over 3 years to develop better sales skills. So, for instance, most of them had to cope with the fear of rejection, from cold calling and things like that. So, building up your self regard, building up your emotional expression and your interpersonal relationship skills, as well as empathy. Those were some of the things we worked on there. And to get more detailed into your question, there was one individual on that team who was, well, they didn't have the most positive of attitudes, so they were low in optimism. And in that group meeting, being, well, they were just more biased towards the negative. You might imagine they'd pull everybody down in the meeting sometimes. So I had to counterbalance that by lifting everybody back up, and then coaching individually one-on-one with the leader. So there was group coaching going on, and then coaching with the leader to help that person, so that he coached that person on the side, um, to be better able to see the work that he was doing positively. And then in other companies, I might, and it's so much fun. I have so much fun when I'm able to coach people from different teams in different divisions of the company, one-on-one, confidentially, privately, because then that's how I get, and I bet you know this too, Spencer, in your work, that's how I get the big aha, the big picture about, oh, this is what this company's culture is like. And then I can see it. It's almost like I can see overarching patterns and principles. And then sometimes I write up a report about what I see and ask for an audience um, with HR or the CEO and try and report my findings and suggestions about how we could tackle this or different things that we could do.
Well, I want to come back to the pessimistic person because the pessimistic person may also be pessimistic about the work that you're doing, right? So you might get some people who think, well, this is just going to be a waste of my time. This isn't going to have any impact on me or my team. What in the world are we even doing this for? I should be spending my time out there making sales calls instead of talking with this person. And I'm curious how you are able to build a desire in a person who is resistant to it, because not everybody immediately buys in and says, yes, Roberta, we need your help, right? So there might be some people on the team who are like, what are we doing this for? Or because of their company culture, they may say, oh, well, we do this stuff and then a person leaves and then we just fall back into our same old habits. And so why are we trying this again? And I'm curious to hear from you how you overcome that, how you overcome doubt in the on the part of the participants to get them to actually buy into what you're doing.
Okay, Christian, another great question. You have hit the nail on the head because that happens a lot, probably maybe 50% of the time. And it's about building trust. So I work very hard to provide that safe psychological space that I told you that it's, a good leader does. So starting out with a person by saying, let's make sure there's something in this for you. Here I am. I'm here as your cheerleader, and here I am with lots of knowledge from different aspects, the different careers that I have had. And my job is to be here for you to help you get something out of this for yourself. So if we put beyond what your company wants you to achieve, what do you want from this? And a lot of times I borrow from, it's called solutions focused therapy. I say, if my pen here is a magic wand and I wave it, and you wake up tomorrow and your life, both at work and at home, is amazing and wonderful, and you are very happy, you're on fire because you're so happy, what would that look like? What would have to change? What would have to be different? And sometimes then they want to talk about the boss. Oh, I'd have to have a new boss, or I'd have to have a new team, or I'd have to work at a different company. And then I have to say, okay, maybe there's some grain of truth there, but we're just talking about you, because right now those things are not changing, unless that's a long-term goal of yours to change that. You can only change yourself. So by changing you and how you respond to where you are in this moment, you can get something out of this for you, and you can become a more productive and happy person. I think, Christian, the longest time it ever took to, let's say, gain somebody's trust was about 6 months. And that was one of the toughest engagements I ever had. But I'll tell you what, once I did build trust with that person, then that person became a fan for life. I haven't heard from them maybe in the last year, but sometimes I get Christmas cards, and they did change employers, they did change jobs. But I believe that, I know how to build trust in interpersonal relationships from my therapy training and my therapy skills.
Let's transition from building trust with you to that leader then building trust to connect with their team members. How can team leaders use emotional intelligence to connect with their team leaders. You mentioned one thing earlier, and that's create that psychological safety. And you mentioned that in
Mm-hmm.
the context of having conflict. You've probably heard of the idea of mining for conflict, or asking people to come up with what maybe disagree with you as a leader. What are some things that you can do as a leader to create psychological safety and drive performance with your team?
Great. Another great question. So I always like to tell leaders you need to learn to be warm and firm, warm and firm, warm and firm. One of the principles from working with children, so I have a minor in early childhood psychosocial development, is what children need, we all need as adults, because inside of us are all little kids, right? Structure, consistency, routine, limits, rules, and boundaries. Those things are also true for leaders who are adults. So if you as a leader are good at communicating those things, that's where people are going to be feeling safe and held. And in the EQI 2.0 model, there are two what they consider pillars of leadership. One is authenticity and one is coaching. So the authenticity style of leadership, which I'll use that one as the answer to your question, is about being a transparent leader. It's about setting the example. It's about being moral and ethical and honest where you can. I mean, I understand sometimes leaders are not able to share everything. They sometimes have to hold some things back. But the leaders who are able to be upfront, give the team a voice, be letting the team know they're perfectly fine if you disagree with them, like they can take it in stride. That's what's going to allow people on the team open up and really express their opinion and voice their opinion. So again, being warm and firm. Another concept comes from Richard Boyatzkis. He's an adjunct professor at Case Western University. He developed an emotional intelligence term called resonant leadership. So resonant leaders are like tuning forks with the people that they lead. So if the people they lead are a tuning fork and the leader's a tuning fork, the idea is the leader sets the tune or the tone, sends it out from this tuning fork, and then the team picks up that vibrational tune and they're in resonance. So being approachable, being the leader who's always going to be there for somebody, like, you can come to me, I will tell you the truth as best I can. I will be there for you. I'll set the tone. And sometimes leaders who can say, I'm in it with you. Like, hey, we're all struggling because interest rates are high and it's an election year and we don't know where things are going. I'm in it with you and I'm working hard too. Often, it is one of the best ways to be, especially with your high achievers and your high performers.
I love that you quoted Richard Boyatzis, and I guess he co-wrote with Annie McKee and Daniel Goleman Primal Leadership, where he said the fundamental task
Yes,
of leaders
it's
is
on
to
my shelf over there.
yeah, it's to prime good feeling in those they lead, and that happens when you create that resonance that you're talking about. We have a couple of comments, Christian, I want to share before you ask your next question. First
Let's
of all,
do it.
we've got Linnea Brumbaugh. I don't know if you know Linnea,
I
Roberta.
sure do. Thanks for
Oh,
tuning
great!
in.
So she's got a couple of comments that she loves your comments here, and then she said this about your warm and firm. I tell my new teaching colleagues who feel bad about their students' hurt feelings, high empathy, low grades. You got to be warm but firm. I guess she's confirming what you said there. Thank you, Linnea, for joining us.
Yes, thank you so much.
Yeah, we appreciate those comments. Now, to my question, I want to come back to this tuning fork analogy, which I think is quite powerful, with the leader setting the tone. But we all know some people who are tone deaf, right? They just can't get it. They
I
can't
told you,
carry a
Roberta. He always asks great questions.
and so, as a leader, how do you know when to just cut bait? Because you may go through all of these steps, and sometimes the fit is just not a good fit. How do you know, and how do you advise leaders, and also individuals who are with an organization? You know what? We've tried all this stuff. This doesn't work. That doesn't work. It's time to get somebody in here who could be more in tune, because sometimes there are people who just can't.
And so, an interesting question. I certainly have had clients that we come to we do come to the conclusion that they might be better served elsewhere, and often it's not only that. Well, they might need to develop their emotional expression and their reality testing, which is what I think makes somebody tone deaf, but it could also be that the company is tone deaf. I'm thinking of a recent person. One of the things that I helped them to do, we had several discussions about this, is how to leave their position gracefully, because they were a director level, but in that company that was just one level below the C-suite, and this person wanted to be a member of the C-suite, felt that they had been led to believe they'd become a member of the C-suite, and then it became obvious it wasn't going to happen. And the background wasn't a fit either in terms of the technical skills. This person was better suited for a much larger company and found themselves in a smaller company. And the skills are different, the mindset is different. Sometimes it's not so transferable to come from a very, very large company, and when you have, what I think he had 200 people working for him, and then went to a smaller company where maybe he had six and had to form a strong argument, let's say, to have a seventh. That was just not a good fit, and it wasn't going to work. So then, how do you tell the company? How do you leave gracefully? How do you leave so that you're on good terms and you have not burned any bridges? And then I worked with him on that as he made his announcement. And then I also was able to talk to his boss, just to close the gap, if you will, and help pave the way for that transition. And last I heard, it worked out well. And the company hired a new replacement that seems to be working out well. And then, then the other person is moving on in their career too. So that does happen. Sometimes it doesn't work out all warm and fuzzy like that one did. I've had it where, the person who needs to leave is very unhappy, very unsatisfied, and they might even border on being bitter. That is really hard to help somebody change. But what I try to look for with that is to say, let's do some reflection and contemplation, and why don't you make a list of the things that you learned at this company that you would be grateful for, that will now be on your resume to help you move into a different position in a different company. And then you can also make a list of things that you would not want to seek out in the new company because they were not a fit at this company. So it's almost like a pros and cons list.
That's a really good answer to that tough question. So, I'm thinking, Christian, that there are just some people that companies need to let go of, but struggle with that because, and they allow that disresonance to happen longer than they should, and there's so many costs to that. But let's transition to some successes that you've had utilizing your coaching, your systems to raise emotional intelligence within teams. Share with us some successes that you've had in improving team performance, and what are some steps that team leaders can take to raise their emotional intelligence?
Well, it's very, very exciting, as you might imagine, when somebody has vast improvement. And again, so I'm thinking of one particular person. one of the things I build into almost all my coaching engagements, unless the company just doesn't want to do this for some reason, is a pre-engagement and post-engagement assessment, the EQI 2.0, because you can use it after 6 months. It still has a high reliability and validity factor. So one person I've been coaching, we're on a little break right now, but this person came on board and was burnt out, or at least that's what he reported. He said he was burnt out from the role he had in the company before he came to the company where I met him and am coaching him, because they're a client company of mine. And he was facing a big challenge because here he is burned out. He wasn't really certain about the new role, and he's in operations, and he was having some trouble with somebody who was on the sales team. So in logistics companies, I've learned that sales and operations can often be at odds, or there can be tension there, because the salespeople are obviously trying to keep a client satisfied with the sale, and then the operations people are trying to carry the job out, policies, procedures, so on and so forth. So he was timid in the beginning. When I first assessed him, he needed to develop self-regard because he was knocked down in the previous company, and he needed to develop his assertiveness. He was reluctant to offer an opinion he had strong opinions, but he was reluctant in his emotional expression to offer those when he was on calls with people from sales and people from corporate, so on and so forth. It was so exciting to work with this guy for me because he rolled up his sleeves, dug in. He wanted to improve his leadership skills. He actually had asked for a coach, so that's always better than if your boss says, we need you to be coached. He asked for a leadership coach because he said he needed more leadership training. So can you imagine, Spencer, right there, that's somebody who's open to change, and I don't have to really convince them that they need to change and do better. He came to each coaching meeting with questions, with examples, things that he did. Like I would tell him, okay, work on being more assertive with this salesperson, work on explaining why operations has to do what they do, and ask this person, what you can do with them so that their life at work goes better. So he set up, I think it was monthly coffee meetings with this salesperson. Long story short, he was on fire. He did so well. He got promoted to like a regional director, maybe about 3/4 of the way through the engagement. And then when I assessed him again, he's like the only person I've ever coached that improved in this model by 20 points. So he went from being below average statistically to being above average statistically in, I want to say, about 13 maybe out of the 16 skills. That to me is unheard of, at least in my experience of running maybe about 800 of these assessments on different people. He's like the only one that so greatly improved. And it was just so exciting to talk to his HR director, because they said, I told them, this guy is on fire. He's got to be one of your high potentials. And they see it. They know it. They see it. So that's good too. And he is a leader.
I agree. I love working with people that are excited to improve, and they're not looking at this as remediation, some type of punishment, right? They're looking at this as, wow, I get to work with Roberta and really work on my career. And I think that just that attitude starting point is hugely helpful.
Spencer, may I tell one more story quickly?
Please, absolutely.
Because this is something new I learned, and I was really excited about this last week. So another person that I've been coaching who also came burnt out and into their leadership role. And we've been coaching about a year and a half, almost 2 years now, twice a month. I do offer workshops, but this particular company had not purchased one of my ongoing, like I'm educating you on EQ, just generally speaking. They had not purchased that, but they sent him to another, like a leadership training conference, I guess, for 3 days. He came back from that conference and he was so excited to tell me, oh my gosh, Roberta, now I understand why EQ is so important, because they spent most of the conference talking about EQ for leadership skills. And he said, they told me, if you don't have good EQ skills, you're just not going to succeed at your job. And so he said, Roberta, I hear that now. I hear it. And what I learned about that, because now he's all excited and he's asking me more questions than he used to. And we just re-upped for another year of coaching, so I'm excited about that. I learned how valuable it is for people that are doing one-on-one coaching, that they need a training. They need to hear the research. Time Magazine has a quote that not 90% of successful people have high emotional intelligence skills. And so I may not always remember to say that when I'm coaching somebody and we're just developing one skill at a time. So that was just an exciting thing for me to learn.
Well, I thank you for sharing that, and you're absolutely right. It's like the skills we a lot of people put extra emphasis on the skills that they've learned. That I'm a good accountant or I'm a good computer programmer. That's what gets your foot in the door. But what allows you
Yes.
then to climb and succeed within that organization are the things that we're talking about now that they're not always aware of. So I want to say one more thing, Christian, before I throw it back at you. But you talked about the tension that exists between production and sales. Those dynamics in teams are happening every day because there team within a team, you have different roles that are naturally in tension with each other. So, for example, what's the role of accounting to make sure that we're preserving our capital, and what's the role of marketing to spend that capital, and those two things are naturally at odds with each other, and so that can create tension with each other. And I think it's really interesting that in your EQ assessment, one of the things that I can't remember where it was, but just how do you handle those team dynamics when they're at odds with each other. But for the first thing, I think, is to normalize that it's normal for these departments to actually be in opposition to each other, and that's not dysfunction. That's just you've got a role. But how do we overcome that as an organization to get united for the same end, even though our individual focuses might be actually at odds with each other?
So one of the skills in the EQI 2.0 is social responsibility. And I think that one gets misunderstood sometimes. So that is, again, in this particular model, it's the skill of I care about my own goals and meeting my own goals as much as I care about you and your goals. So if you as the company or you as another team, we're all working towards a common goal. And if I take as an individual, whether I'm a leader or a member of the team, if I have this skill of I care about meeting my own goals as much as I care about you meeting your own goals, then that is a more collaborative, like that's a skill of being collaborative and having high communication. So finding the commonalities between different teams. It might be it could be, hey, if we all succeed, then we all get a bigger bonus, or we all, the company does better. It affects all of us because then it will trickle down in terms of salary or bonus, or some people have equity positions, right? So finding those commonalities, using that skill, also the skill of interpersonal relationships. That's the skill in this model of reciprocity and mutuality. So having an equal give and an equal take, setting a relationship up between two to competing teams or teams that might have different interests for the company, saying, how do we make things mutual? How do we find reciprocity? That is a way to help bridge those gaps.
So I've got one final question for me, and then Spencer, if you've got a final question. But kind of coming on this idea of commonality, I was thinking, as Spencer was asking this question about differences in the teams and their various missions in an organization, there may be differences on our teams themselves. So, in my organization, we've got boomers, Gen Xers, millennials, and Gen Z. And I'm curious to hear from you. Are there some nuances to dealing with these different groups, or do we have commonality? Coming back to what you said near the beginning of our conversation, in the inside, ultimately, we're all children.
We're listening.
Yeah, I usually tell people that. So
I get told that all the time, Christian. You are a child.
Yeah, same.
And that's the thing in the research that doctors Stephen Stein and Dr. Reuben Bar-On have done to put together this model. The idea of intergenerational teams is already baked in. And if you know how to relate to somebody, doesn't matter what age they are, right? It doesn't matter what background they are. If you have the skill set to know how to reach somebody, usually because you have a high empathy, right? Because you're able to put yourself in somebody else's shoes, see things from their point of view, and not judge them. You don't have to agree with their point of view, but to be able to say, I see you, I hear you, I understand you. That is I would say one of the biggest ways to work with diverse, members on a diverse team, is if everybody feels seen, heard, and understood. And then I might add, if they feel valued, then that's going to help. That's just going to set you up for good teamwork.
Yeah, I agree. I think we put too much emphasis on all those differences instead of just listening and connecting and talking to people. I mean, I really like that. We have been kind of steering the direction of this conversation. So my question, Roberta, is what have we missed that you want to share with our listeners that really helps get EQ into action within their teams? What message would you like to leave our listeners with?
Oh, thank you for that opportunity. One of the things that the research of Dr. Stein has taught us is that there are 3 skills, and I always remember them by the acronym ACE, for assertiveness, confidence, and empathy. When those 3 skills are in balance, he looked at a sample size of 76 of the most profitable CEOs. And he noticed, he wanted to see were there any statistical correlations between the 16 skills in the model and those CEOs who were the most profitable. And they came from, my understanding is they came from a diverse group of industries across the US and Canada. And he found out that these most profitable CEOs were high and balanced in those 3 skills: assertiveness, confidence, and empathy. So that has always intrigued me and excited me, especially because EQ is not considered a personality trait. So, assessments like the DISC or Myers-Briggs, those are also wonderful tools. I use both of them too. But those measure and assess personality traits, and researchers have found that our core personality stays relatively the same over time. Yes, you can change your personality a little bit, but not dramatically. With EQ, you can have dramatic shifts, both increases and decreases, just depending on what's going on in your life. Like if somebody's been let go, if they're burnt out, if somebody went through a divorce, they didn't get the promotion that they wanted to get, and they take the EQ assessment, they could end up scoring lower than if they took the assessment at a time where, they just got married and they're all excited, or they just started at a new company, or they just got a new promotion. Again, these are skills that anybody can build. Your EQ skills are at any age, at any time, under any circumstances, if you do the work. So to me, I like to tell people, why not be like those most profitable CEOs? And why not focus, if you do nothing else, focus on building and keeping in balance your assertiveness, your confidence, and your empathy. And that goes back to that warm and firm type of leadership that I told you about earlier, because that's what's going to set you on fire. I mean, again, here I am with a psychotherapy background, which of course I love what psychotherapy can do. However, when I first took the EQI 2.0 to get certified myself, I had a little hubris and I thought I would score a lot higher than I did. And I didn't, not on every skill, and I had some balancing work to do. And then I went, why is that? Oh, it's because we don't go to school and we're not taught, okay, you have to develop emotional expression. You have to develop emotional self-awareness. You have to develop independence, problem solving, stress tolerance, flexibility, optimism, reality testing, so on and so forth. So when I got my score that wasn't the way I wanted it to be, I hired an EQ coach myself, Dr. Dana Ackley, who's now, Dana taught me a lot. So shout out to Dr. Ackley, who's now towards the end of his career. But I noticed when I took my learnings from the EQI 2.0 and I coupled them with what I had learned about myself by being a client of therapy and a therapy provider, I just got so excited because I thought, oh my gosh, anybody can transform themselves. If you're unhappy, if you don't like where you are, either at home or at work, you have the sovereignty or the power to own your own destiny, in terms of, you study this stuff and you can get better and it's up to you. And to me, I find that very exciting.
Wow. Well, this has been a super impactful conversation for me on a number of levels. And Roberta, I really appreciate you taking time out of your very busy schedule to join us here today and share so much of your knowledge and experience. If viewers or listeners are watching this or listening to this, our podcast, and they want to connect with you, they want to learn more about how they could develop emotional intelligence, what's the best way for them to reach out and connect with you?
Thank you, Christian. My website is eqicoach.com. So eqicoach.com. I'm also on LinkedIn as Roberta Moore. And you can always email me, rmoore@eqicoach.com, or phone me at area code 828-329-0431.
All right, folks, a million different ways to connect with Roberta. So no excuse. Please connect with her. And Spencer, you've been helping teams for decades, helping people build high performing teams. What's the best way for folks to reach out and contact you?
LinkedIn. Reach out to me on LinkedIn and say hi, give me a message. And I just want to acknowledge Roberta for, just the humility of talking about the EQ self-awareness. When I took my first assessment, I was like, oh my gosh, I am just so terrible. And it was that journey is hard, and it takes some humility. And I'm so pleased that, you shout out to your coaches, and that just says a lot about you and your openness and vulnerability, and that's very refreshing in today's world. Christian, the brilliant mind that you are of value to so many people, and so many more need to know you. How can they find you?
LinkedIn as well as easiest. Just look up Christian Napier on LinkedIn. I'm happy to connect with anyone. So, listeners, viewers, thanks for taking an hour out of your day and joining us. We really appreciate it. Please like and subscribe to our podcast. We'll catch you again soon.